evening, ladies and gentlemen, gentlefolk everywhere you may be. I have to admit, I have had and am having very serious misgivings about producing content on the subject of personality disorders and narcissism in particular. Not because I don't find the subject interesting, I do, and not because I'm bothered particularly by the content I've been producing or even the way I've been doing it. It's not one of these things where you look back on it and you go, oh, I shouldn't have done it like that. I really wish I hadn't said that. There's videos that I put out that I have later deleted, but generally speaking, quite happy with it. It's all good. The content has been good and the way it's delivered is good. But I have to level with you and be very, very, very clear. And I've avoided doing this for a long time. I've avoided doing this, if we're going to be really honest, probably for about 3 years. Really 4. I've known since 2016 that well, I've been very, very clear since 2016 that you can say a thing, you can do a thing, and people can take it completely the wrong way. And it wasn't actually from one of my videos or a comment on one of my videos. I was actually listening to an Eckhart Tolle seminar, and he said something fairly benign, fairly bland about being present and how it's useful to be present and in the moment. And somebody got really, really upset with him. A woman in the audience got really upset with him, and she was saying, she'd sort of said that what she heard was that she shouldn't honor her dead child who died tragically several years ago because he was saying to let go of the past, but her child was in the past. And she was really upset. And I personally believe that he was genuinely disturbed by it. Like, he was really shocked by it, which any human would be, despite all your meditation and everything else. When you're facing somebody who's deep in an emotional flashback, when you're facing somebody who is in a tremendous amount of emotional pain and is disturbed, it is disturbing. We would all like to play the game of being dry and separate from one another, but of course we're not. We're not dry beings. The boundaries are not clear between us, and when somebody else is in a certain emotional state or has a certain emotional mindset, it rubs off on us. But anyway, I walked away from it and I thought, wow, you can really say anything and have people misconstrue it to be the opposite. I mean, he didn't mention anything about grief. He didn't mention anything about not honoring dead children, or, I mean, who would say that? I've never heard anybody, any nutcase serial killer cult leader ever say, if you've lost a loved one, you know, a spouse or children or whatever, I've never heard. I'm sure somebody in the comments will say, well, you don't know about Bilbo Bobface in 1972. I'll go, oh, okay, that guy, I guess, or that woman, I guess, said it, but I've never heard it before. And so she accused him of saying something that not only did he not say, but that nobody, or very few people would. We can basically say nobody ever would say. And then recently, a psychotherapist contacted me and said, aren't you worried that people will misconstrue this information you put out there? And, you know, I am. I know that they do. I know that the online narcissism community has long been a blanket and sort of a hogbox for people. And I've long been I've long known, certainly for 4 years, that people can misconstrue. You can say literally anything and people can misconstrue it to be something else. You can't help that. And that doesn't mean you should be silent, because even your silence could be misconstrued. We now live in an age where even saying nothing can be considered a very direct crime. So you have to say something, and you have to try to tell the truth. A lot of YouTube material, boys and girls, is consumed in a completely masturbatory way. It kind of functions as an anesthetic. I know, because I use it myself. I don't listen to narcissism channels, though. That's not what I'm tuning into. So what I wanted to say is, well, there's a few things. Number one, I've long had misgivings about producing content about this subject, not because it's not interesting, not because it's not relevant, not because people don't need to know. They do. And I don't think it's always being misconstrued, and I don't think it's always being misused, but I know it's being misconstrued and misused by a large number of people. And it does create an echo chamber. It does create a sort of a closed loop of assumptions. It can create a reality tunnel plus Overton window of a scope of things that we can and can't talk about. And where I've tried to sort of say, hey, maybe we've got some presuppositions here that should be challenged, either people get really, really upset with me, or the video simply isn't watched. So if we're doing truth telling, let me tell you that I know exactly what it takes to make this channel grow, and I have known for a long time, and I'm not prepared to do it. You basically confirm what people already believe, and you stroke them on the ego. And I can't do that. I can't do that, because the only thing it will do is bind you to the people you're listening to, talking heads like me. It will bind you to YouTube itself, which is month by month becoming an increasingly dodgy looking organization that seems driven. I don't really see how else I can say it. It seems driven. It's clearly driven by a political agenda that I wouldn't care which way the political agenda was. I don't want it to be, driven by that. It's not an open environment in which to communicate anymore. Certainly not anymore. You've got to be very careful what you say on YouTube and on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook and Instagram, of course, now being Facegram. It's one entity. So I'm not saying I'm not going to produce videos on narcissism anymore. I'm not saying that, but I do. Sometimes what I do in my videos is I hint. And I hint knowing that a good enough number of people will get it. But I also know that some people really need it explaining to them in a way that's not subtle and it isn't hinting. These videos and the way they are being used as a means of sort of manifesting an affirmation bias will not just keep you from healing, they'll make you sicker if you use them that way. So if what you do is you listen to a video and you say, there you go, that proves it. I knew my ex-husband, my ex-wife was a bubba, whatever the psychiatric term is. And then you think by making them completely wrong, you're completely right. It really will make you a weaker person. It really will have a degenerative effect. I'm not doing a Jordan Peterson impression. I'm not saying, oh, you'll be a bloody degenerate and you need to make your bed, hey? You need to pick up your bloody burden. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to tell you sincerely that if you use my videos and other videos like this in that way, you will degenerate as a human being. Not hyperbole, not exaggeration. Your capacity to be a human will degenerate. Probably already is degenerating. Probably already is quite damaged. A few months ago, I asked in the community, it's called the community. It's called the community tab on YouTube. And I asked in the community tab on YouTube that YouTube has given me, do you want a community? And a lot of people said yes. And I was thinking, well, why? Why? Why do you want an online community? Are you lonely? There are things that you will need in your life that the internet and your phone will never give you, can't give you, cannot, never, ever, ever, ever. If you need friends, you should go out in the world and make friends. If you're lonely, you need to do something about that. If you need to talk to people, you need to do something about that. If the solutions we find for our problems are always cheaply won and cheaply bought and lazily achieved, there'll be weak solutions. I might move from Jordan Peterson to George S. Patton in a moment here. About this thing of the trying to find online communities because you're lonely, trying to find the solutions to your life through your phone, and trying to do the affirmation bias fandango whereby you prove to yourself what you already suspected was true and want to be true and needs to be true in order to justify your life choices. If you've created a scenario and you're using these videos to say somebody with a personality disorder, somebody who has a psychiatric condition, a hard to understand psychiatric condition, a rare psychiatric condition, in order to interpret the breakdowns in your relationship, and you then take that and you say, ha, that makes them altogether wrong, and that makes me altogether right, let me offer you this warning. If you are trying to walk a path in which you're telling yourself and you're living a narrative that you're blameless, if you're blameless, then you lack responsibility. And if you lack responsibility, you lack power. This is not a good place to be, folks. I know that the way things are moving and the way the narratives around us are being constructed is very much about blame, and it's very much about guilt, and it's very much about saying, I didn't do it, he, she, it, or they did it to me, and that's why my life sucks. And there are people out there who probably really can do nothing to save themselves. They're probably essentially prisoners. They might be prisoners inside of a family. They might be prisoners of a government. They might be in some awful condition somewhere. Very few people watching this right now are living that life. Boys and girls, come on. Very few of you. I have the stats. I know the age. I know the demographic. I know quite a bit about the people who follow me, and I know an awful lot more about the people who buy my courses. Yeah, some of you are in former communist countries, and some of you are in dire straits, and it's almost physical sometimes, but the majority are not. And if you were, you wouldn't have access to this YouTube video. Trying to fulfill the expectations of the modern orthodoxy is degenerative to you as a human being as well. Your job on earth is not to try and make yourself blameless. Your job on earth damn sure isn't to make yourself blameless by blaming other people. If you're blameless, then you are absolving yourself of responsibility and you're absolving yourself of power. The people who win this game, because it all moves as one. It all has to move at the same time. So I win the game. I fulfill the orthodoxy. I'm pure. I'm blameless. I'm the pure victim of a predator. The pure victim of a predator. This is not victim blaming, by the way. Let me just, because people bandy this term around all the time, and I have to tell you, it's driving me completely loopy. Victim blaming is when you say if somebody was victimized by somebody else, it was their fault. It is not victim blaming to say to somebody, hey, you could have done something about that, my friend. You could have avoided that. That's not victim blaming. Victim blaming is I kick you in the shin as hard as I can, and somebody else says, you made him, me, do that to you. That's blaming a victim. Somebody else coming along and saying to you, hey, you could see he was getting angry and aggressive with you. You could have left or moved or done something about that. That's not victim blaming. That's the truth. That's somebody giving you feedback from the environment. Here's another thing that concerns me about the echo chamber, the online echo chamber of the narcissism community. And somebody very uncharitably, not me, a few years ago called it the narcissism hogbox. The narcissism hogbox. People are getting non-human validation where they need human validation that lets them know that they're okay, but it's not real. It's completely inauthentic. It's a simulation of being hugged. It's a hug box because they can't deal with the vulnerability of a human being was the implication. The narcissism hug box, he called it. This closed loop starts to banish, punish, and hermetically seal us who are inside of it from external information, from feedback that goes against our worldview, and from criticism and from critical thought. So what exists inside of the reality tunnel is only that which we say may exist inside of the reality tunnel. So the orthodoxy would be, I'm a victim of narcissistic abuse, therefore I am blameless. The person I was with was a pure predator. There was nothing I could have done to prevent it. They did everything wrong. I did everything right. They are a demon. I am an angel. Okay. We're not discussing whether that's right or wrong at this point. I'm just telling you that if you live by those coordinates inside of a hermetically sealed psychological, philosophical chamber, you're going to get sick. You're going to get really sick. Really sick. Your capacity to function as a human being will degenerate. If you're going to make your life all about trying to fulfill the orthodoxy, which becomes, of course, we're just virtue signaling now. Of course, we're virtue signaling. Because what else is an orthodoxy for? It's so that the others can see you doing what you should be doing, but you're never authentically doing anything. Authenticity has nothing to do with this game. Authenticity is not written into this game. Authenticity is not written into this game, and it accepts no negative feedback. Do you see how that mirrors narcissism? I pray to God you do. I pray to God. Hard shell, trauma-based shell, protecting the soft, vulnerable child. Hard shell, everything bounces off it. All external feedback is reframed, reconstituted, and recast as being an attack, cruelty, some predatory evil. It's never, no, this person is just telling me the way things are. It's recast as something else so that it ricochets off the hard shell, and so that everything inside the shell remains protected. Everything is symbolic. It's just for show. There's no authenticity. There's just virtue signaling. We're all turning up and going, okay, I want to belong to this group. I have no identity. I have no purpose. I have no sense of self. God help me. I pretty much hate myself because I've never done anything of use. I have no sense of contribution. That's not everybody, but many people in modern culture are like this. I think self-loathing is at an all-time high because we're just growing in awareness of our own uselessness. And instead of countering that by going, I'll make myself useful, let me create, let me contribute, let me help my fellow human beings, we go the other solution, the solution that is lazily won, that is cheaply bought, that comes at the end of a mobile phone, which is in your sweaty pocket and is covered in a mist of urea and pocket stench. It's covered in your sticky fingerprints. Is that where virtue comes from? Is that an act of courage to go online and pop off at people? Is that what virtue is? Is that what an act of courage is? Are you doing anything useful as a human being when you do that? I'm not saying that people who stick with these types of videos in the narcissism community are narcissists. Oh my God, there's plenty of people who are actual narcissists in the narcissism community, but I don't think that's the majority. What I'm worried about is that the coordinates that have been created here are delusional. They reject external feedback, and they encourage and reward artifice and punish and ignore authenticity. So whilst the online, I am not saying the online narcissism community is full of people, is full of narcissists. That would be, it's just not true. It's just counterfactual. But I will say, it's the road to narcissism. It runs on highly narcissistic, highly solipsistic coordinates. What are you watching that stuff for? Have you ever asked that? Why am I watching this? I'm consuming, I'm eating a psychological and philosophical food to give me the energy to do what? What are you learning? Are you learning? I mean, you're always learning, you're always attaching, you're always learning, but are you learning? Are you telling yourself that you're learning more and more and expanding your awareness of the multiple ways in which people can be shitty to each other and use each other? Or are you learning that one way of dealing with your own failings is to blame other people? Are you learning that it's easier to just dwell on social media and use the phone that's in your sticky pocket to make yourself feel a little bit better than it is to actually get out there in the world and have an impact? Is that what you're learning? I don't know. These are questions you all individually have to ask yourselves. Another thing that concerns me about this is the effect of collectives. I am very uncomfortable with the way in which this is entraining us subtly to think of ourselves as collectives. Very frequently through the what would you call it? The matrix, the prism, the filter of identity politics. Speaking as a. Why don't you just speak as a human being? If what you have to say has value, unless you're discussing neurosurgery and saying, well, actually speaking as a brain surgeon when you're talking to a bunch of plumbers who are pontificating about neurosurgery, you don't need to say speaking as a. You don't need to mention background, age, ethnicity, nationality. You shouldn't need to do that, but this format is encouraging us to. You might say speaking as a victim of narcissistic abuse, trying to get some pre-qualification through your suffering. It's the frightening thing of all this, it has religious overtones. I have suffered. I have paid my penance. I have self-flagellated, as they do in multiple religions. I have been celibate. I have, I've fasted, I've starved myself, I've dwelt in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. I've suffered. Therefore, I'm paying my way into heaven, this celestial space. My Father's house has many houses. I mean, maybe the narcissism space is one room in heaven that we've paid our way into through being the blameless, scapegoated, sacrificial lamb victim. But unless you're talking about your childhood, and most of the people here, or many of the people here, will be talking romantic relationships and adulthood, it's super unlikely that that's the case. And if it's childhood, then you fulfilled the three things I mentioned before. You're blameless because you had no responsibility, because you had no power. Okay, that's fine. Children have no power over their parents. It's almost one of the defining states of childhood, you could say. No power, no agency. Therefore, extremely diminished responsibility. Therefore, no blame. That's why we don't in most civilized countries across the globe, if you're under the age of 18 and younger and you commit a crime that a 42-year-old commits, you'll usually get a less stiff penalty because there's less blame for you, because blame is connected to responsibility, is connected to power. It's no good for a bunch of adults to be walking around telling themselves they're blameless, responsibility less, and powerless. Because as much as you win the game of the orthodoxy and the virtue signaling, is the same extent to which you'll become bitter and you become resentful. Because without knowing it, every time, let's do it like this. Every time you tell people online or infer or feel that you're blameless for where your life is up to, you're simultaneously creating a backlog of bitterness and resentment. Because blamelessness is direct. And if you're blameless and your life hurts and your life sucks and your life is, or your life is just not where it's supposed to be, of course you'll feel bitter. Of course you'll feel resentful. You won't feel sad. You won't feel disappointed. You won't feel motivated to do more because somebody did it to you. Well, and at this point, many people might say, no, I never said that. You did, because you're starting from the premise that all the problems you experience in your life right now are caused by other people. I hope that this makes sense, folks. I hope that this makes sense. Yes, I have a blunt style. No, I'm not interested in stroking egos. No, I'm not here to pat people on the bottom. I'm not talking to adults like they're children. I hate all that shit. I hate it. And I don't think it's good for you. I don't think it's good for anybody. I'll give it to you straight. The thing is, we are, I think, going to come to some crisis points here, and I think it will be the case with YouTube, with the way it's going, where you probably won't even be able to speak as freely as we do now about these subjects because they're within the realm of psychiatry. Well, that's within the realm of medicine. How long before this stuff starts being fact-checked and censored? And I'm not even saying, and that's a bad thing and that's wrong. The amount of crap that is spouted around this subject, maybe it does need some fact-checking and censoring. I don't know. Generally speaking, I'm against censorship, but I'm also against people spouting nonsense, total gibberish that they've made up or they've heard from someone over there, and it's an echo over here, and it's a photocopy over here, and it's an echo over here, and then they repeat it. Maybe that stuff should be gone, especially on a subject that is so sensitive, especially on subjects that are so crucial. I don't want to keep people sick. I don't want to disempower people. I don't want to give people a blanket, a hogbox, a way out, an excuse, a way of saying that they're powerless. You're not powerless. Nobody watching this is powerless. Nobody. The more you double down on how powerless you are and how much of a victim you are, the more you will create resentment in yourself and bitterness. There's enough of that in the world. There's plenty of people out there who've managed to convince themselves they're the victim of somebody. They're the victim of something. And that bitterness builds and builds, and eventually it will spill out into vengeance. You'll go out looking for vengeance. And if you don't have an enemy, you'll make one up. You'll just pick somebody. You just pick somebody out the line and you say, okay, you'll do. Somebody's got to get it, mate. I'm afraid it's you. And you'll use that person as a human sacrifice. Probably not literally. I hope not literally, but that was hyperbole. What I said earlier was not hyperbole. That was hyperbole. But there are metaphorical and metaphysical human sacrifices going on. There are metaphorical and cyber versions of the Wicker Man going on, or of the Inquisition and the burnings going on. There are people out there who want to stop other people from being able to speak. Not that they just don't want to hear them anymore, because somebody said, somebody said, isn't this the same thing as no contact? If you want to cancel somebody, isn't that the same thing as no contact? No contact is a discrete decision made between two adults. I don't want to hear from, there's a bottle in front of me. Give me a name that begins with B. I don't want to hear from Bob. So I go no contact with Bob. I block him on WhatsApp and on my phone and on social media or whatever. And then if I see him at the supermarket, I don't talk to him. I don't stop Bob from speaking. I don't cut out his tongue. I don't prevent him from speaking to anybody ever again just because I don't like what he has to say. I don't have the right to do that. Even if I think he's objectionable, I don't have the right to silence him forevermore and stop him from speaking to anybody. That's insane. Think about the level of entitlement that kind of logic requires. The psychopathic entitlement. I don't like what Bob said to me, so let's make sure he can never speak ever again to anyone ever. Really? Really? That's what we're doing now? Really? How about you just deal with the fact that Bob didn't make you feel very good? Don't speak to Bob again. He probably is a knob. Bob is a knob. And you probably should go no contact with him. But you don't have the right. Morally, you have the right in cyberspace. You have the right according to big tech. You have the right and the ability according to big tech. But morally, you don't have the right to silence somebody and prevent them from speaking forevermore. You're not judge, jury, and executioner. Who the hell are you to make that decision? You can't. Nobody can. That's why we used to protect free speech, because nobody had the sheer bloody arrogance to assume that they could silence somebody forevermore. The people who were liberty lovers and who wanted to protect free speech believed that. The other lunatics perhaps didn't. They probably did have the psychopathic level of entitlement, arrogance, and thin-skinnedness. My final warning about spending an awful lot of time online and an awful lot of time watching videos about narcissism, you're going to end up very thin-skinned. You're going to, and this again, being thin-skinned is not, oh no, it can be. I was going to say it's not one of the 9 traits of the DSM for grandiose narcissism, but there are people who've written about narcissism who do talk about hypersensitivity and being thin-skinned to criticism as an element of narcissism. But bigger than thin-skinnedness is ideas of reference, which is definitely spoken about in the literature on narcissism. Ideas of reference mean you think everything is about you all the time. So watching these videos, interacting online, talking about narcissism, watching narcissism videos, ironically enough, leaves you with this whole stream of coordinates that are entirely narcissistic. And the last 2 I want to cover are thin-skinnedness, hypersensitivity. You can't deal with somebody's opinion not agreeing with your own, so you have a hissy fit and you try and have them completely silenced, cancelled, deplatformed. Why? Because they said a thing that made you feel not good. Okay. And the second thing, ideas of reference. You think anything anybody and anyone is saying is about you. This is one of the things that I found myself wanting to say to people in the inverse, where I want to say to people, it's not about you. Believe it or not, nobody in this conversation is actually talking about you right now. I know that the way you're presenting it and the way you present yourself, you've assumed that we are or they are. They aren't. This isn't about you right now. Hanging around with my sister's kids at the moment, 18 months and 3 years old, and you have to sometimes say to them, hey, it's not about you right now. You have to share. You have to let other people speak. Other people can play with the toys too. It's not about you right now. It's all right when the person's 3 or the person's 18 months. They don't have boundaries. They don't know. I feel a bit weird saying it to a 50-year-old. I feel very strange saying it to a 50-year-old who's educated, privileged, and middle class. They have a good life. They have a good education. They have all their comforts catered for. And so you have to say to them, can you just chill for a second? This conversation actually isn't just about you right now. So these are my misgivings, ladies and gents. It's not an announcement like dramatic, and I'm like, I'm leaving, I'm never making a video on narcissism. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I can see which way the wind is blowing with YouTube. I do think eventually, within the next year, some of these videos will be fact-checked and censored. I'm dead against censorship, generally speaking, but I actually do, as I said, and I just want to reiterate it, I do wonder if that we wouldn't benefit from a little bit of checking on the subject, because it's so sensitive. And if you get bad information on this subject, it could hold you back. It could lead you to making disastrous decisions in your life. If somebody starts telling you that person is an emotionally abusive predator, but they're your snuffed out twin flame ready to be rekindled over an open fire, and you get back with them, there will be hideous consequences to that. And the final thought which I've had is I am wondering if we're hitting peak narcissism, if the whole subject isn't sort of ready to sort of collapse on itself. And this is the hardest one, the hardest point that I want to make, which is, again, being honest, and I've sat on this for 4 years. Ladies and gents, if we want to be adults, and we really want to move forward, you're going to have to look at the ways do what you want. Okay, do what you want. It's called the Spartan Life Coach. It was an ironic name. It started as a joke, and then it went on for too long. And it's one of the things I regret. I'm not a priest. I'm not a life coach like that. I think if I was going to describe myself as anything, it would be as a content creator. I create content. I try to help people. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. For those of you who are in a very small niche of people who think, oh, I think Richard's actually got onto something here, and he has something, he really, really speaks to me. You're in a minority, maybe it's like, 5% of people listening. I really want to know what he thinks about this. Please explore your own narcissism. Please explore your own. Oh, he's saying everybody's a narcissist. He's victim blaming again. He's gaslighting us. Okay. Do you know where the term narcissism comes from before you knee-jerk react and say I'm victim blaming and gaslighting? I'm not going to give it to you. Go look it up. Just open another tab, go to Wikipedia, put in narcissism. Who created the term? When did they create it? What was it? What did it pertain to? You should all do that. If you care about this subject as much as you want to posture that you do or signal that you do, you should at least know. There's a couple of things you should know. You should know the 9 traits of grandiose narcissism as they're laid out in the DSM. If you're going to do videos on borderline, you should know the 9 traits of borderline as laid out in the DSM. That's a good starting point. Just like basics, white belt stuff. Narcissism, you should know who came up with the term, what the context it was brought up in, and when. These things are important. They'll tell you a lot. And for those 5% of weirdos who really, really have a lot of trust in what I'm saying and really, really want to move forward, look at your own narcissism. Yes, you have it. You're not pure. Narcissism is an essential state of human nature. What is he saying? Narcissism is an essential, critical part of every human being's developmental process. What is he saying? He's victim blaming again. He's saying we're all narcissists. No, I'm saying that everybody has to go through a phase of narcissism, and you still have narcissism inside of you, or at least I hope you do. I hope you do. Look at it. Look at the ways in which, 9 traits from the DSM, you're in love with an illusory image of yourself. Look at the ways in which you're entitled. Look at the ways in which you expect to be treated in a special and unique way. Look at the ways in which you're envious of others. Look at the ways in which you're hyper-competitive, bullying and sneering towards your enemies. Oh, not me. I can't wait to see the comments. Not me, Richard. Don't project your evil onto us pure lambs. Not me. Okay. I'm not a priest. This isn't a cult. It's not a religion. I'm just talking here. You do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. It's not going to be for everybody. You say you want to do shadow work, you won't look at your own narcissism. You say you want to become emotionally literate. You say you don't want to get involved in emotionally abusive relationships. You say you're the victim of narcissistic abuse, and you don't want to look at your own narcissism. You don't want to look at the simple, clear, blatant truth that everybody has something called narcissism. Everybody's in love with their own selves. It's kind of a critical component of your survival. What's the extent of it? What's your dark half? What's your shadow? Not me, Mr. Grannon. I don't have an unconscious to resolve. I don't have a shadow. I'm pure. I'm a being of light. I'm an angel. All right. All right. All right. It reminds me of No Country for Old Men, though, when people post stuff like that, where he says to the guy who's running the hardware store, if the rule by which you had lived your life had led you to this point, of what use was the rule? Oh, sorry, no. That was actually a line he said to a guy who'd screwed up and he was about to kill him. It was a guy who'd made a huge mistake through arrogance, through narcissism, and was about to be shot dead. And he's asked by Anton Chigurh if the rule by which you'd lived had led you to this point, of what use was the rule? Which is another way of saying, if you're so smart and you're so pure, why are you here, sat in a chair in front of me now? And in the context of No Country for Old Men, Anton Chigurh is death, but he's also consequence. He's also karma. He's cause and effect. If you're so smart and you're so slick, why are you the one sat in a chair sweating while a weirdo with a dodgy haircut is pointing a silent shotgun at you? Not everybody enjoys my metaphors. I would remind you, though, ladies and gentlemen, these videos are free and you can tune into something else. Or you can ask the manager of YouTube for a refund. I never wanted to talk about narcissism. I came onto this channel to help people from the self-defense community who were people pleasers become more assertive. Then we started talking about narcissism. Then we started talking about CPTSD. Along the way, people asked me to talk about borderline. So I studied borderline a little bit, and I've done a couple of videos about that as well. I am not a mental health professional. I have a degree in psychology. I worked as a counsellor for the probation service. I worked in the British education system, offering pieces of advice around psychology. And I've done some psychology work, people would say, for the last 10 years or so. Some people really like what I do. Some people hate what I do. This isn't really about that, though. This is more of me sort of saying, got misgivings, you know, don't really know how helpful this is at this point. Bit concerned that people are watching these videos and kind of looking at themselves in the mirror as they do it. They're enjoying, they're sort of consuming the videos narcissistically. Even if they're not NPD, you can enjoy something narcissistically without having narcissistic personality disorder. Did you know that? Were you aware that that was a thing? Yes, you can. You can have narcissistic defenses. You can respond narcissistically under certain circumstances without having NPD. And you can consume and enjoy things narcissistically without having NPD. And I do wonder if people are watching these videos and using them as a mirror to hold up to themselves to see how pure and blameless they are whilst condemning somebody else. I'm not saying that that person you're talking about isn't a dreadful human being. There's plenty of dreadful human beings out there. Some of them are low IQ. Some of them are thoughtless. Some of them are greedy. Some of them are selfish. Some of them are lazy. Some of them are really, really genuinely nasty people. All of this is true. All of this absolutely is true. There are bad people in the world. Not denying that. I'm talking about the narcissism community, these videos, and how they're being used. I'll leave it there, eh? Hopefully that was useful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I think the people who are ready to hear it will hear it in the way that it was intended. Those who aren't were never going to hear me anyway. So I guess I'll detach from the outcome of this one. Thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Cheers.